אז דוקטור חווה אלדובי, ראש תחום תולדות האומנות באוניברסיטה הפתוחה ומנהלת אומנותית של הגלריה, חוקרת אומנויות המסך ואומנות ניו-מדיה בפרט. עוסקת בניסויים אמפיריים באומנות מחקר שערכה בגלריה וירטואלית עם פרופסור דורון פרידמן ודוקטור ביאטריס הסלר, התפרסם לאחרונה בכתב העת Psychology and Aesthetic Creativity and Arts. אני אעבור לאנגלית. לוקיה אלבנו is a moving image artist and filmmaker. She recently represented Greece at the 59th Venice Art Biennale with the exhibition Oedipus in Search of Colonus. In recent years, after receiving international acclaim, she started to be involved with the production of VR films and founded the first VR production company in Greece. Her work has been presented by institutions and festivals around the world and is part of numerous international collections, including the Onassis Collection, the Dakis Joannou Collection, and the Center for Art and Media Karleshu ZKM. Please.
Okay, so I will start here and then maybe join Lukia. I will start, Lukia, with your permission, with a few words in Hebrew. אני רוצה להציג את המחקר שלי, למרות שכאן באמת הבמה היא של האומנית שנמצאת איתנו, אנחנו מאוד שמחות שהיא נמצאת איתנו, ועוד יותר שהעבודות שלה נמצאות כאן ואתם יכולים לחוות אותן, עבודות באמת על הממשק בין מציאות מדומה לאומנות, זה בהחלט אתגר גם לאומנית, גם למציגים וגם לצופים. אני רק אגיד אולי בכמה מילים או אנסה להסביר מה הקשר שלי למרחב הדיגיטלי, אם יש כזה, אנחנו עוד נגלה. בהכשרתי אני היסטוריונית של אומנות, ובגדול הדיסציפלינה של תולדות האומנות שנקראת Art History נולדה במאה ה-19, והייתה דיסציפלינה שהייתה מבוססת על, בואו נאמר, ניתוחים צורניים, פורמליסטיים, בהקשרים היסטוריים, תרבותיים, מאוד מאוד נוקשים, זאת אומרת, יש לה מסגרות מאוד מאוד נוקשות. אבל מה שמציק לי כבר די הרבה שנים, ומה שדוחף אותי לחקור בכיוון האמפירי, הוא שאני אישית מרגישה אומנות דרך האצבעות ודרך האור. וזה דבר שמציק לי ורודף אותי, ובכלים של תולדות האומנות אני לא יכולה לחקור אותו. מצד שני, יותר ויותר אני מתוודעת לעובדה שיש כלים שבהם כן אפשר לחקור את החוויה הזאת, ואת השאלה של מה אומנות עושה לנו, מה אומנות עושה לנו בגוף, איך אולי בהיבטים גם יותר חברתיים, תרבותיים, רחבים, יש לזה משמעות, מה שהאומנות עושה לנו בגוף. ובהקשר הזה התחלתי באמת לנדנד לחוקרים כמו אלישי, הוא הבא בתור, אני אתפוס גם אותו. אבל בינתיים אלה היו אחרים שהם מומחים בין השאר למציאות מדומה. ואחד הפרויקטים שעשינו היה ניסוי בתוך גלריה וירטואלית, שבו נבדקים חוו אומנות, ואז ביצעו משימות כלשהן שבנויות על פרדיגמה מסוימת, שבה ואכן הצלחנו להוכיח את מה שאני שיערתי באופן אינטואיטיבי. לפחות צריך לומר, לא כמו במדעי הרוח שמשערים השערות גורפות, ואז בונים הסברים תיאורטיים גורפים, במחקר אמפירי הולכים בצעדי נמלה, אז צעד נמלה ראשון כבר עשינו בהצלחה, וזה אחד מהדברים שאני עושה בהקשר של נגיד הממשק בין אומנות למדעים המדויקים. היבט אחר כהיסטוריונית, אני עוסקת באומנות ניו-מדיה, ולכן בעצם אני עוסקת בהיסטוריה של אומנות שנוצרת עכשיו. זה נוגע להרבה שאלות, יש לזה ממשק עם מה שענת דיברה עליו, כי השאלה היא איך משמרים את ההיסטוריה הזאת, שהיא היום בת 5-6 עשורים והולכת לאיבוד, בגלל שחומרה מתיישנת ותוכנה מתיישנת, ועבודות פשוט לא קיימות יותר. ושאלה נוספת היא באמת תהליכים שמתרחשים עכשיו, נגיד בינה מלאכותית שפרצה לחיים של כולנו, ומערכות שמייצרות דימויים על בסיס דימויים קודמים שמאמנים אותן עליהן. אז בהקשר הזה הגלריה שלנו באמת משמשת ותשמש כמעבדת מחקר לאמנות ניו-מדיה. דוגמה קטנה שאני יכולה לתת, יש אומן שעובד עכשיו על פרויקט מבוסס בינה מלאכותית שיוצג אצלנו בסתיו הבא. אני כחוקרת מלווה את ההתהוות של הפרויקט ותוך כדי כך לומדת על האינטראקציה בין אומנות לבין מערכות שבאמת נוצרות as we speak. אז זה על קצה המזלג מה שאני עושה, and now I would like to give the stage to Lucia Alavanu. She was introduced by Daphna. I can say that I experienced the installation Oedipus in Search of Colonus in Venice, and I was so overwhelmed that I came back the other day and I waited in turn in the rain for another hour just to experience it again. So I'm really excited about being able to even experience the demo here and then the other two works that Lucia has allowed us to exhibit. And I would like to just mediate whatever she would like to tell us about art and VR through a couple of questions that I've prepared.
Thank you, Hava. It sounded amazing. Beautiful language. I'm sorry I didn't understand the previous lectures. It's fascinating for me to be in such a great context because XR is interdisciplinary, and this is a very interdisciplinary context. It's not only art or only science. It's everything together. And thank you for the invitation very much to the Open University and you and Carmet who hosted me here.
So we're very happy, and let's go, straight to business. And I would like to ask you, in the context of this new Digital Humanities Center, what would you say about VR and art? Is it a totally new medium, just bursting into our lives, or is there an evolution here from cinema or video?
Well, what I found very interesting, I think it's a very, very broad medium, and it can be used in so many ways, and it is used in so many ways. I mean, today with the metaverse, there are chat rooms where people do sports together, they do psychotherapy, they do many different things. So it's super broad, science, everything. But for me, what was interesting, being an artist and not a filmmaker, I don't have any cinematic training, is that it borders between theater and film. I would not say if it's closer, I cannot say if it's closer to film or to theater. Because when you put a VR camera somewhere, you create a stage around it. Everything is seen. So a lot of the rules of cinema, I mean, it is cinema because it's not live. What you see has already been recorded in camera, and you experience it as a viewer or a participant afterwards. But during the process of making a VR film, you create a stage. You don't have framing. One of the basic things about cinema is framing, editing, fast editing. All these rules are kind of changing. Also, there is the element of space, of time and space. When you do a VR film, you don't only have time, you have space. You have to think what will be happening in front, at the back, at the right, and at the left of the camera. So it's a completely, completely new arena. And I think artists always really were inclined to be the first to explore, maybe a bit braver than somebody who has a very specific training, like somebody who comes from the world of cinema. So what I found when I started working with VR films is it was very difficult to find, I created my own company in Greece. I made the first VR Greek production. And the most difficult challenge, one of the most difficult challenges, was to work with people from cinema, to get a very good cinematographer and tell them, okay, let's forget what we know and start from scratch. It was very difficult. So to find my own team, I needed really open-minded people. And I'm making an emphasis on that just to demonstrate what a completely different context it is.
So yeah, the idea of not having a frame is really striking. I mean, I didn't even think of putting it this way. As related to having people all around, I was telling you beforehand my experience in one of the scenes in Oedipus, when I suddenly realized after a few seconds of, watching what's in front of me, that there was Antigone sitting behind my back. And it felt very creepy. I felt like, how long has she been there? Was she watching me? And then the second day I came back and I was kind of prepared. So the minute the scene began, I looked to my back to see if she was there already. So this is totally different than what you experience in cinema. In your interview for the Venice Biennale catalog, you said that you related VR, or it had this element of Artaud's theater of cruelty. Can you expand on that?
I mean, as far as I know, Artaud is the first to use the term virtual reality, and he related it to his theater of cruelty. Virtual, the term virtual. What Artaud did and what theater does is that it really evokes feelings. It can terrify you, it can grab you, it can make you jump up from a sound, it can really directly go to your heart. This is what immersive technology has the power to do. I mean, with cinema, we have a very safe distance. We are viewers. And it's interesting now that there's so much discussion, I found, in festivals, in VR festivals and conferences and everywhere, of how to name the person who experiences VR. We cannot say viewer anymore. I like the word guest, but when I use it, people don't quite understand what I mean. In gaming, it's different. Again, a VR storytelling, a VR film is not gaming. You don't give a choice of pressing buttons and having this kind of control. So it's interesting. So that's what I mean. I mean, in theater, in Artaud's theater, you are really immersed into something. He through his theater of cruelty, he wanted to have this closeness to the viewer, guest, or whatever we want to call them. So that's what I mean, it's closer to theater.
So it kind of affects your body. So this is what I was saying in Hebrew beforehand, that what concerns me as a researcher is the way art is affecting our body. Now, I've got two suggestions to make. First of all, there was this VR artist, pioneer VR artist in 1995, I was telling you about, Char Davis. She called the participant an immersant. So if I may suggest, you might try and use that. And the other question really relates to critical distance. And we were talking about that because a lot of the discourse on the perils, the hazard of virtual reality is exactly that it kind of, it draws you in. It's very compelling, and you forget to be critical. You can't be critical because you experience it rather than think about it, the way we are maybe used to contemplating art from a distance. So how do you, and if you wish to balance this in your works?
Well, let me first say that what you say is very important for me. I believe that as artists, as academics, we have a lot of responsibility now because this new world is part of our reality. The metaverse is taking over, and it can be used in so many ways. Propaganda, I mean, the mere fact that Artaud pointed out, virtual as something that is so effective means that it can be very dangerous also. So we do have a huge responsibility. Yes, there is critical distance. I mean, in my own work, I don't think very rationally when I make something, but there's a whole process of research. So, for instance, let me say a few words about the film that I made, Oedipus in Search of Colonus. I'm sorry I cannot show the whole film here, but it's part of a wider installation, and because it's very new, sometimes artists, we don't have the right to do anything we want with our work, so there are producers, and so, but I hope one day I will show it in Israel, the full thing. But about a quarter of it is playing here. So this was made in a Romani community. That was a very, very difficult location.
Let me just say that Romani is tsoanim in Hebrew. It's a completely different word. Gypsy.
Yeah. It's not a very politically correct term in Greek, so, but Here
Okay.
you use it, right? You say.
We say, yeah, in Hebrew it's Tuani, which equals gypsies, I
Okay.
guess. So, Romani.
So that was a huge challenge, and I felt I had a lot of responsibility. And one of the reasons, when you speak about critical distance, that I decided to use this medium is that it's very inclusive. I wanted to make a film there. It's a location outside of Athens, in the western side of Athens, where it's really uncartographed. It doesn't exist on Google Maps. Small communities live there that are completely dismissed. They are not part of society. Mm-hmm. And I drove accidentally into this location where Romani live. And I really felt I want to make this film. I saw a lot of parallels to this film, and I wanted to make it there. But I felt that taking a camera and pointing it to these people was not the right approach. I would be like somebody who passes by and, you know, grabs my story and kind of make use of them. Where this inclusive medium of VR made them feel we all were part of the crew. I mean, I'm there sometimes. You have to be there because everything is shown in a VR camera. It has 6 lenses all around. So yes, that's one of the examples I can give you
Of preserving critical distance in a way that's still inclusive.
Exactly.
Oh yes, because your works are very political and they're about, I guess, immigration, also feminism. Maybe we'll touch about that a bit later, but more about Oedipus. So you adapted a 2,500 years old tragedy by Sophocles, Oedipus in Colonus. So how does this work together?
So I found that this story resonates so much to our days, right? It's just to say a few words about the actual story. It's Sophocles' last tragedy. He wrote it just before death, and it's the same Oedipus that we know, very famous Oedipus Rex, but at the end of his life, and he's blind, he's completely presented in a different way because he's not this heroic, arrogant ruler anymore. He's a person in decline who is looking for a place, that's why he goes to Colonus, to die peacefully and be accepted to be buried. So burial is an important subject. And I found that it has so many similarities to those people who, in fact, in reality, they came from Thebes, like Oedipus. Mm-hmm. They settled there. And it was very organic what happened. The casting was very organic. So the old man who played Oedipus, he says on the camera in Greek at some point, I was a king in Thebes, and he means it. He was the king of the gypsy in Thebes. Okay. So they had this nomadic life, and they often struggle with burial also. They don't have citizenship. They're not allowed to be buried in Greece. They told me all those stories. So at the end of the film, where there's a messenger at the end of the tragedy who talks about Oedipus' death, I chose, well, he found me actually a deaf Romani man who was really, in sign language, telling me the story of his father, who was not allowed to be buried in a nearby graveyard. So everything happened really organically.
So it's like reliving the ancient tragedy in a way in today's Greece. That's fascinating, I think. And also it's compelling, even if you don't know the whole story, I think, and you don't know about this deaf man and what he is saying in the sign language somehow comes through. Now you mentioned that you have there's a feminist aspect to your work. So, for example, in New Horizons pilot, there's this feminine voice that creeps in. Maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, the voice that hijacks the narrative. It's an Alice in Wonderland. Yes, I think that VR there's something. It's an unexplored territory. And also, you know, as women, storytelling is in cinema, 99% of stories we've heard are made by men. So it's even more of a challenge.
Oh, there was a lecture about that you missed in Hebrew, of course, just before you arrived. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It all sounded so interesting. I wish I could understand it. But yes, also I fell in love with the medium instantly when I first watched the VR film. And I think there's something really feminine about this space. The way sound and VR relate together, for me somehow, it just, and this is a spontaneous thought I had, it's not, you know, I haven't read it anywhere or it's not supported by any theory, but something to do about the baby in wound and the way we hear the mother's voice. So the first storytelling is through a mother's voice, and the first relation of a baby to the mother is by hearing her voice, right?
Interesting.
Katja Silverman, a feminist.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you think about experiencing VR as a kind of intrauterine experience.
Yes, I mean, in some ways. Yes. If I may, for me, you know, I do have this feeling that. So that's one extra reason that it's interesting for a woman to tell a story.
That's very interesting, thank you. And would you like to tell us more about New Horizons pilot, which is going to be on until the end of the month, the way it relates to the film Two New Horizons from 1940, the irony of it?
Yes, I mean, I always like to create contradictions. I see my work, although it's film, like a collage, like taking different elements from different contexts and putting them together. What collage is. This is a very kind of American narrative. It's the Futurama in the 1940s, just before the war, 1940. There was this vision of the future, and there was this propaganda film. It's fully propaganda.
Yeah, I really recommend watching it before or after watching.
It's on archive.org. I noticed the previous lecture mentioned archive.org.
If you would like to talk about that, yeah.
That's where I discovered it. So this voice kept playing in my head, this propaganda voice. And what really interests me is that when Futurama was made, they created, there are some photographs that are photomontage, they don't really exist, of a maquette showing America and high roads. It was a big plan to expand and connect the nations and so on. And there's a big maquette, and heterosexual couples are sitting above it.
Right. I saw it. You can all find it online.
Yes,
it's unbelievable.
It's on archive.org again. And they created some speakers that were playing on their inner ear. They created some special chairs and speakers on their inner, full propaganda through sound, playing this New Horizon voice, talking about highways, freeways, we are free now, capital, the beginning of capitalism, of course, above this maquette. And there was something really immersive about it, I thought. It's like the first experiment of Google Maps also, somehow, seeing from above. So this voice, this male voice was playing in my head, at a time where, after 15 years of living all over the place, I went back to Athens, and it was in the middle of the crisis, and everything was being ruined. The airport was abandoned, changes were made. So I again went to the western side of Athens, this area where migrants were pushed, and there was this dystopic landscapes. I felt that animals were taking over humans somehow. There was something really, really dystopic about it. So I made this contradiction. I wanted to film from above, mainly with a drone. It's all an experiment. It's not a fully scripted film or anything. It was very, very spontaneous and experimental. And to use this voice, which, as you said, in the end gets hijacked by Alice, especially the court scene where she's being unjustly being, yes, there's something quite political.
Like with the off with her head,
yes,
right? So I don't know how much time we have left, or we don't. Okay, so thank you, Lukia. Do we have some time for questions from the audience? Okay, thank you very much. We really appreciate, we're thrilled about having you here.
Thank you very much.
That you deal with in several of your works.
Yes, very interesting. So you have 3 questions, I suppose. The colonial voice, this is very interesting, and I would relate that to Brecht also. So I always start, because myself, I come from a country that has been very much colonized. But I also lived in the UK, and so I lived the 2 extremes, let's say. So I always use this narrative, especially through sound. In all these works here, I think it exists somehow. That is, in English language, the New Horizon is a very colonialist voice, right? And then there's this contradiction through the images. This is very, very important for me. And this creates this kind of Brechtian alienation effect for me, through the sound. I don't do it rationally. It's there in my work from the very beginning. Remind me your second question.
Being blind.
Yes, being blind. One of the very important points for the film, the Colonus film, the Oedipus in Search of Colonus, is the first scene, which is very subjective. And in a way, it can relate to colonialism the way you put it, because we colonize another's body. This is what happens in VR, right? And I wanted to start it by putting the guest, immerser, into the position of Oedipus. It was very important. So in my mind, I call this, it's not part of Sophocles' tragedy, this birdcage, but I call it Oedipus' nightmare. So I wanted to start by the subjective, also because VR is a blind medium. But also in New Horizon Pilot, there's something about blindness, because we're talking about a horizon, and we see it here. So there's this contradiction, always. We are blind, I mean, and it's maybe a bit of a teasing way to approach technology, right? Is it opening horizon? Is it closing horizons? You know, there's a big question mark. What will bring to the future? There's so many good aspects about it. It can be used for, you know, people with disabilities are able to experience movement and in so many, you know, positive ways. But on the other hand, it's blinding us to social relations, let's say, or to being part of communities, real communities.
Oh, and then Neta. Oh, sorry, Iri.
Okay, hi. Thank you for the words. I mean, I saw your work in the Biennale, and I was so amazed. I think it's one of the works that I've gone with me since last September. So I'm so happy to be here. I have 2 questions, please. One is the means of production. I mean, especially in the New Horizons, it's already. While you are watching or while you are a guest, you can also notice the means of production by, I mean, the photographers that were standing behind me, and also some 2 women or they're photographing with their telephone and the drone above.
Yes.
And I thought after you explained between the theater and the cinema, I thought it's another kind of a hybridization between them both. Like you are also photographer and you are also being photographed. So I would like to hear your elaboration about it. And the second one is, I was wondering since September when I saw the work, the bird's eye view. It's like people, we were always up above the situation. Sometimes we went down, but I felt like I'm sitting on a chair and I'm not really part of it. I mean, it's like it lands to, and it was confusing. Yeah, so this is the other question.
Okay, so your first question, it's also an answer to your question, which I forgot to. Yes, it's a very deliberate choice in New Horizon Pilot to leave these elements. So it was, I had a dilemma. Should I mask them out and be closer to, you know, the illusion of cinema? But I thought, this is an experiment. That's why I call it pilot also. Ironically, also you're a pilotess, I prefer to say, than a pilot. But I deliberately chose to expose it. I thought, you know, as artist, I have this liberty. It's not going to go to Oscar or anything like that, so I have this freedom. And it might be valuable in the future to see these, you know, what usually is hidden. When you say about the eye view, are you referring to Colonus, to the Oedipus in search of Colonus? Yes. We are an outsider. Oedipus was an outsider who enters a community, and this is for me, the most interesting and important part. I like in the Sophocles tragedy the first chorus. It's quite unusual that it's a hostile chorus. So he goes to this community and he's first treated with hostility. Now, this very much mirrored my experience there. This is a community that has very closed borders. You are not, me as a non-Romani, I was not accepted there immediately. So this kind of reflected very interestingly the story. And it was very important for me, this coming down gradually for the viewer. So you're not suddenly inside the community. And yes, the best way to do it was that, because you get also an overview. But also this God-eyes view is, you know, in relation to the story and Oedipus' relation to the gods, you know, it was important to keep it there.
I thought that it was brilliant to start with the eagle in the cage, because in the end of the story, it's like you come from one cage to another cage. Right. And it was really amazing.
Which is the other cage?
Of this community.
Right. Yes, yes.
Okay, so Neta has a question. My colleague in art history, and Kermit, we'll see if we have time, otherwise we'll discuss it over lunch.
I'm happy to let Kermit go.
It's okay, Neta, please, you go ahead.
So, two questions. Thank you. It was fascinating, both the talk and the VR experience. It was really overwhelming. I wanted to ask two things. One, I feel as if sometimes technological change changes the way that we gaze at reality. For example, I see my children experiencing reality and imagining how they could take a photograph, and you know how they look at a view and think in which way they can photograph it. And I wonder if your perception of reality changes as you're working with these tools for representing it in different means. That was the first question. And the second, you made a fascinating comparison with film and with theater, and kind of found yourself in explained the difference between each of those and the work that you do in VR. And I was wondering if there's any place to also make a comparison, and if there is any similarity with real-life immersive experience, for example, within a church, within a spectacle, a religious spectacle within an enclosed space, maybe especially Greek Orthodox Church, which is kind of centralized in that way, and whether the definitions of participant, immersant, visitor, spectator, they gain a different kind of vitality if you look at those kind of things, because it gives the comparison a bit of history as well with human experience of having something that they are immersed within.
Yes, I mean, in relation to your second question, the first thing that comes to my mind is that a church, the shape of a church is a dome, right? So and the way the sound affects or manipulates even, if I may say this word, participants and the spatial relations in there. A voice travels, and this is what happens in VR. I mean, in my last film, the sound is directional. So in order to work on that, you create a sphere, and you place sounds around the sphere. And it's a completely different approach to cinema, or even Dolby Surround. Yes, you see it, but the image is over there. It's not the same, right? In terms of my perception of reality, if it's changed in my life, you mean? If my life has changed, I don't think it has. But I was lucky to discover technology at a later age. So, you know, I'm sure children of today will have a completely different perception of reality. I noticed what really interested me. I'm taking the question a little bit into a direction that interests me most is how the Romani kids relate to technology. So we found a way to really relate together, and they really engaged with it. It feels that they're so familiar with it, it's so part of them that it transcends borders. So although there was this barrier of borders there, because it's like a ghetto, I might say, I don't like this word, but this is how they're ghettified in Greece, technology transcends borders. So that's a positive aspect of it. Of course, yes, I'm sure, I don't know, I suppose it can change perception of reality. Not for me, no. I feel safe still. Let's see what happens.
Thank you, Lucia, and I'm sure we can continue the conversation outside by the works, and I pass this to